we were watching a movie, and she literally started climbing on my head. So instead of saying, "Oi, would you stop climbing on my head already?" I said, "Honey, it seems like you're feeling better now." It's like, yeah, Mommy, I am. It's like, "Well, it seems like you want to do something really physical." She's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm still really tired, so how about we finish watching the movie together, and then we go to the park?" She said, "Okay." And then she sat down next to me, and that was fine. So sometimes it's about listening with different sorts of observances. But it's really complex. There's no way we're going to get through everything we want to in an hour and a half, or even in a whole week. So welcome to Resiliency. My name is Dr. Shoshana Garfield, and I will be talking you through some issues around resiliency, what it is, how to recognize it in your children, not only how to foster it, but what it's really made out of. Not just what it is, but where it really comes from, because it's fairly universal. And we'll be talking about examples and really do our best to leave time for questions and answers, as well as do a demo for what you have handouts on, which is the emotional freedom technique tapping. The two main means of fostering resiliency that I'm going to speak to you about today is inner wisdom, which is about something unbreakable in all of us. Something that's really hard to put into words because there aren't quite the words for it, but which we'll all recognize from at least some of our life experiences. As well as the very practical hands-on tapping technique, which looks really silly when you first come to it. Believe me, I'm aware. But that has worked absolute miracles. And you'll see a video of my daughter having a very quick impromptu EFT session for an aversion. I'm a private psychologist, and I have two main sets of clients. One is people who have been very severely abused, and the other are senior executives. And there is actually overlap, and the overlap is in resilience. That being very abused is, of course, a high-stress situation. So it's dealing with stress, really. And the stress that we'll continue to talk about, stress is what we think it is, in a very literal sense. My work has been featured in international media and in national print, including The Guardian. And I've recently been contracted, very excited, to revamp my daughter's school's well-being policy, which includes these two strands that I'm sharing with you today. So what is resiliency? We've already had the term someone talked about, bouncing back from emotional distress. I think there'd be, oh, by the way, if you've got any queries, I'm very American in this way. Just raise your hand or just talk. There are components of bouncing back. We recognize it as kind of a calm, being able to handle things. Sasha and I and our daughter Alia were on our way to a holiday in Turkey, and we were at the airport counter. And she started making a phone call after saying, "Ruski, Ruski." He was like, "Yeah, Russian." And we suddenly realized that neither of us had checked if Sasha needed a visa to go to Turkey. So we realized in that moment that it might be Ali and I having a whole week of private time. And for all of us, there wasn't even the flicker of upset. That is just, well, what is, it's okay. And we'll all have a great time doing whatever it is that we do. All is already well. So it's not just bouncing back from distress. Sometimes it's not having it at all in the first place. Reacting to things in a way that's, I can't say the word on the that's the one. With equanimity. And if one does go there, as it were, into what I think of as drama. Drama is when we think the world is hurting us, or something going on is hurting us. And we're reacting to that with resistance, whether that's the resistance of outrage, or anger, or withdrawal, resistance. And it's like, hang on, I'm doing this to myself. if any of us got uptight about that turkey holiday in those few moments, it was a couple of minutes actually, wasn't it? Then it would have been us doing that to ourselves. We don't have to do that. So taking responsibility for our emotions is absolutely critical for resilience. Because let's face it, if this big stuff that happens in our lives were responsible for our pain and for our harm, then we would all walk around accumulating harm like a physical object. But it doesn't work that way. We'll keep on talking about that. It's also about empowerment, that buzzword, knowing we can do something about our emotional states. We're not a victim of our feelings, although we can certainly feel very flooded and overwhelmed by them, including by the feeling of overwhelm. Does that make sense so far? Yeah? An ability to remain focused under pressure, to not be distracted by stressful thinking. I'm using stressful thinking as a kind of summary term for verklempt thinking, to use a Yiddish word. And this is really important. A safety net. We all have it, we all use it, but few of us actually honor it and use it in our daily lives the way it could be. That really deep sense that we are okay. Sometimes big stuff really happens. As some of you here know, I have a son who's dead. And that's big stuff. That doesn't get much bigger than a parent than that. When he first died, I had this really deep sense that all was well, somehow, that I was okay. I wound up doing much better than my husband at the time. And the difference in our resiliences led to us drifting very apart. We're really okay. We are really okay. This links to discipline, and we were talking, that was talked about, referenced earlier anyway. The capacity to manage strong feelings and impulses. If we just get flooded by them and we can't step back and go, whoa, I'm doing a job on myself here, then you indeed can get lost. A child in a tantrum is lost. Absolutely lost. They're not irrevocably that way. They do come back. They don't stay in a tantrum state permanently, which is very nice. But for those moments, they are lost. And we all get lost every day in our feelings. You know, in those moments we think, not finding the car space, not finding a venue, that was me this morning, briefly, because I was able to detach. Losing a favorite toy, not getting a favorite toy, breaking a favorite toy. Whatever it is, it's massive in that moment. And it doesn't, the circumstance of it doesn't matter, whether it's a holiday, a family holiday in Turkey, or a broken toy. It's the same thing, because it's all about our thinking. Our relationship with what's happening. The cool thing about resilience is that it can be learned, which is why you're all here. You want to learn more about how to be more resilient, and your children be more resilient. Well, that's an assumption of mine, actually. I assume that you all realize that in order for your children to be more resilient, that you need to lead. There's this guy, Sid Banks, who talks about inner wisdom, and he has this wonderful quote: life is a contact sport. Painful, excuse my French, painful shit happens. There is no way to get through any life without having pain in it, no matter how fiscally privileged someone may be, no matter how privileged they may be in whatever means of status, or support networks, or peer groups, or a great school, or a great job. Everybody has pain in their life. Everybody, bar none. It's being able to handle it when it comes up, to welcome it even as another opportunity to learn. And again, seeing it that way is, in neurolinguistic programming terms, called framing, the way you look at it. So if you frame it as an opportunity, when my son died, well, let's take a step back. Any of you ever hear of Jill Bolte-Taylor? She's a neuroscientist who specializes in studying brain damage from strokes. And she gave a talk on TED.com, TED Talk, and she talked about when she was aware she was having a stroke, part of her mind went, "This is so cool! I get to have a stroke from the inside!" And for me, there was something actually similar. It was like, wow, I work in this field and I get to have this grief. This is wonderful. This is really cool. It was the framing of it that enabled me to get some distance and to deal with it in ways that were really helpful. It was also devastating. That was just separate. So discipline and resilience. Oh, but reliance, that was a correction typo. Relying on discipline, resilience is a critical component of discipline. Can't have discipline without resilience, because I think it was you that was saying, how do we help them fail? Whatever you want your children, or your children want to achieve for themselves, they will do something poorly. As I often say to my daughter, if you want to do something well, you have to be willing to do it really badly for a while, generally speaking. And that's not a comfortable period to put up with. There's a book called The Path of Mastery. Again, if you sign up, I'll send you the slides so you'll have all of these. Path of Mastery. It's a couple of different flavors to that. One is doing what's right, no matter what. There's an issue of integrity here. And being able to commit to that integrity is part of resilience, because there's a higher calling. And that higher calling is part of what allows that detachment. The resilience issue is detaching. Being able to detach from what's going on currently, from that flood of feeling of whatever catastrophe is going on in the moment. And I don't use the word lightly. And working towards a higher, very much non-instant goal. So if somebody wants to lose weight, and it's not going to happen after skipping a bit of dinner, smaller portion, it has to build up. There has to be that commitment to that higher goal. So sometimes if Alia gets distressed over not being able to, well, how much do you want to get good at that? Do you want it enough? It's waiting for you. It loves you. Saying, come back to me. So part of dealing with is teasing them back to and using a bit of comedy, and has to be in rapport, though otherwise they'll feel humiliated, of course. Timing is everything in comedy, isn't it? Someone asked a question about this as well. How do I know my child's resilient or not? Well, the shorter and the fewer the temper tantrums is a good tick box. If they can respond philosophically to their own troubles, my daughter is to quote Sasha and says, well, it's not the end of the world, is it? That's someone that was asking me about perspective. Minimal or no anxiety before or at tests and exams. It's like, okay, my well-being doesn't depend. I'm okay, no matter what I score on this exam, I'm all right. Even if I don't get into Cambridge because I get a C instead of an A star. It's all right. When they become your teacher and they call you out lovingly and compassionately when you are not resilient. So my daughter will say to me, it's not the end of the world, Shoshana. It's like, I know, honey, I'm just upset for now. I'll be out of it in a moment. Any questions on this stuff so far? That's all? Comments?
To me, putting a bit of perspective in my mind, because my eldest has got Asperger's, and of course it's that limit switch that's missing in his brain, so we do see accumulation of small changes that build up to the bigger meltdowns, as we tend to call them, and just a few lessons learned that you're pulling out here, the techniques we can use to try and minimise that.
I'm thinking of the emotional freedom technique stuff would really be critical. And with any technique, don't introduce it when you need it. If they're on the floor having a tantrum, come here, give me your hand, and start tapping. Obviously that's not the right moment. But to introduce it beforehand, and if you do it again, if you lead, then that's much more effective then. Spotting resilience, also stable performance, so consistent. One of the big problems that footballers talk about is like, I know I can play brilliantly, it's just being able to play brilliantly when I call upon it. So not being able to be consistent is due to stressful thinking. And again, making mistakes, doing stuff they're not good at. And again, leading by example. You have to be okay as well, doing stuff that you're not good at and being committed. Always got to lead. This increases with age. Capacity to listen to reason. Part of your cleverness as a parent is in framing, in being able to present it. I didn't make a slide on this, but you're all salesmen and women. We're all selling our ideas, we're selling our rules. You have to use, it would be helpful if you could use the same salesmanship techniques that salespeople use to get sales. And part of that is being congruent. You know, if somebody is selling, I don't know, cars, but they think their car is not very good, it's going to come across. This new car is not going to sell well. But if someone really believes in the product, that carries through. So that's one very easy one where you're already doing it. But you know they need to go to bed at a reasonable time because their beautiful bodies need rest. Yeah? So you're already doing some of the things. Part of the reason children, even with the physical capacity to listen to reason, don't, is because they're too flooded in their own thinking about it already. They can't see past the filters of their own thinking. That lack of resilience is about that not being able to step back. That stepping back bit is absolutely critical for resilience. Absolutely critical. I can't overstate it enough.
And it's something they develop at age 6. My daughter's 12 now, and we've been through all sorts of things with her, but I can now see that she can kind of switch off that sort of emotion, step back, and actually use logic and reason. That's only started happening in the last year or so.
It's about the time to talk about brain development. The prefrontal cortex is where emotional regulation can happen because it gets triggered all over the brain and body, actually. And kind of processing and being able to override is something that physically develops over time. Much like the capacity for speech. I don't know if any of you did sign language with your children when you were younger. Quite a few nods. Yeah. So you'll already know that the larynx doesn't physically develop at the same pace as the brain's capacity, the Broca region, for language. Which means that they can comprehend much more than they can convey. But when you teach them sign, she did things like, can you change my nappy? So that was change and play and things like that. So she was able to ask long before she could ask. So if the brain's not capable of reasoning, it ain't gonna happen. So there are some conditions which persist all the way through adulthood in a kind of an inability to step back. And it starts from about 18 months, really, emotional regulation, about then. And it continues all the way up to taking a big leap in adolescence, believe it or not, and then tapering off in terms of brain development. Now, of course, there's a whole nature-nurture argument, but it's undecided, really. Is it our child rearing? What is it really about this brain development pathway? But it seems to start at about 18 months and then tapering off in the early 20s. So yes, it does develop, but we can influence that development very, very much. And it's not about hastening it, because it'll only go as fast as it'll go, but you can make the most of what you get at every minute. You know, so each age you leverage off of what you got. And you have to know your child well enough to know what those limits are. Again, we could be here a week talking about specific examples and case studies, and it would be marvelous to do so. I'm missing it because I want to know all your stories. Methods of building resilience. Again and again, demonstrate it. Be resilient yourself. And this is the big ways, like with jobs and houses and smaller things like traffic and smaller things like parking spaces and unfinished dinners and broken washing machines. And everywhere, children watch us so carefully, especially the gifted ones. We are so exposed and vulnerably open to their scrutiny. Even when they don't have the cognitive capacity to feed back to us, they feed it back to us in other ways. We are watched constantly, scrutinized constantly, and modeled constantly. The models of resilience, part of the habits of emotion, are in what's called procedural memory, like motor memory, like learning how to play tennis or drive a car, as opposed to episodic or semantic memory, which is, well, what's the capital of the UK and what's the capital of France and how many people live in Paris. So it's built over thousands of repetitions. And you offer those thousands of modeling. You offer those thousands of examples all the time. And it's not that you have to be perfect. Part of what you need to model is not being perfect too. Yes? You need to be okay with failing. You need to be okay with absolutely screwing up. You need to be okay with being flooded and then coming back. Model stepping back. It's not that you have to be completely resilient all the time and not react. It's more like, whoa, I'm doing a number on myself. I'm going to step back from that anger. And really being congruent with that. Any questions on that so far? All of it's critical.
Are you going to touch on overexcitability, particularly emotional overexcitability?
I don't have a slide on it, but we can. Can you talk more now?
Well, I went to the workshop at the last Big Family weekend about overexcitability and identified that emotional overexcitability is very much part of the package with my children. And I wondered how that interplays with resilience.
Overexcitability also links up with overstimulation in environments. And part of that is planning and preempting, but of course we can't plan everything. And there are things like Christmas, which are just kind of inherent. I'm Jewish and I celebrate Christmas too, and she bounces a lot there. And so, putting things in beforehand, being able to do the tapping now. So it's okay, and then agreeing, talking through your child what your child's like and what's going on in your child's body when the flooding is happening, so that you recognize beforehand what's the signs, and you agree on code words. And it could be a code word that's really fun and silly, like banana, or it could be something more related, like worm, or you go like an icky, wormy feeling, because it has kinesthetic feelings, that the feelings really have a process in the body. And then it's like, Mommy, I'm getting those worms again. Or you can ask, are you getting those worms? And then we can tap on it.
But should you be fostering resilience to that overstimulation and those environments that are causing that?
Little by little.
Yeah.
Little by little. For a lot of people, their triumphs, their absolute victories, their gold medals are measured in millimeters. With a lot of the clients I work with severe trauma, who have just want to disappear from the world, being able to walk down the street to buy their groceries instead of having them delivered is massive. Yeah. So you have to meet your people where they are, because obviously kids are people too. So meet your people where they are. And if you think of them as people, it's also more useful than thinking of them as children. There was a study done, something called nonviolent communication, comparing reactions to vignettes. And in one vignette, the people weren't told the age of the person. In the other vignette, they were told the person that was being interacted with was a child. And the results were very dramatic, that in the vignette with the child, there was so much more disrespect, so much more assumptions, so much superiority. If you think of your children as people, it helps step back from that cultural weight of disrespecting children. Because we're all immune to it. We're all not immune to it, rather. Most of us in here are white, and we are not immune to the pressure of racism. We're not immune to the pressure of sexism. We're not immune to any of the roles that we're meant to play. And we kind of have to interact with that. And so interacting with what we're culturally told children are capable of is part of that too. It partly answers your question. Part of this is what I'm talking about, build it beforehand, build in the structures beforehand. Somebody I was speaking to at break talked about having family meetings, for instance, and talking to your children about these methods. Building it in before you need it is really critical. And part of building it is showing examples of resilience in media and books that are age appropriate. I have studied slavery in World War II a bit, so that's something that I think of a lot when I think of opportunities for resilience. And discuss what is resilience for them and what makes them resilient, but in whatever ways the language that is appropriate for your child. Shepherding them through issues of resilience as they arrive. Not, oh God, there you go again, obviously. Although sometimes we're going to do that. Sometimes we will lose our rag. It's okay, just being able to step back from that. And developing a worldview as a family that supports resiliency. So again, going there first and teaching them what you're congruent with, selling them something that's a really good product. I know salespeople often have a really bad name, but the fact is we all do it whether we like it or not. Another way of doing it is getting your kid into therapy. That's letting someone else teach it, provided they actually are competent enough to do so, which may or may not be the case. I would like to refer you to a movie called Dead Wrong, which is about how the psychiatric establishment is prescribing medication to children, and it is literally killing them. Or, especially for gifted children, stunting their giftedness. So you have a kid who's got ADHD, put them on the anti-ADHD drugs, and their giftedness slides. It was horrific, but a really important movie. Obviously, therapy can be great, just with the right person. Learning yourself and teaching your child the techniques, EFT, energy psychology, breathing, forget about the EP, just emotional freedom technique. Breathing exercises, there's a book called Conscious Breathing by this guy called Hendricks, and meditation. And there are books for children in meditation, getting them to slow down a bit. And it's age appropriate. So a kid who's an age and capacity appropriate.
Can I ask?
Of course.
Talk about one line between this and say discipline. I mean, sort of, how do you know to draw the line between when discipline is needed, say for this, and say coaxing? You know what I'm trying to say?
I do. Discipline has two main strands. One strand of discipline is just that coaxing, actually. Discipline of being able to talk yourself into not eating that third piece of cake, or getting your child to sit down and do their homework when they'd rather do something else. Yeah? So again, it's about selling something to yourself. And the other strand of discipline is really what's considered punishment. And I don't do punishment. I never see any real reason to do punishment if you've got all the other structures in place. Natural consequences and accountability, those are separate issues, and I talk about that much more in depth in my other workshop. Yeah, it's a big difference between natural consequences and accountability. If a child is acting selfishly and they're at an age where it's getting to be okay to talk about those things, then adding those in and holding them accountable is okay, even when they're acting selfishly towards us. And part of the difficulty of that is that, I know I'm speaking really fast, I need to slow down. A lot of the difficulty is that when children are selfish in our direction, we've gotten so used to them not being capable of taking us into consideration. We've had years of being overlooked and being invisible, that it's a really big gear shift for us to hold them accountable. And it has to, so we have to make the change as well as encourage them to make the change. And we talked about daily practice. And of course, on a broader scale, the structures outside of your family, encouraging your school to develop a well-being policy, which includes issues around resilience. There are costs, of course, of not building resilience. Underperformance. Not being seen as gifted in school, that happened to our child as well, when she had major body blows of her brother dying and a divorce and a very big move, which would, kind of throw most people into a bit of a spin. But she was only 4, she just turned 5. So it was a big deal. So when I was talking to the school about her being gifted, they're like, yeah, right. Literally. Like they rolled their eyes. It was hilarious. So we took her out of school. Jumping out of university, that's happened to friends of mine with gifted children. Developing neurological and psychological disorders. For instance, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Ideation means thinking about suicide, and of course doing it, or attempting to. Afraid to take risks and make mistakes. Withdrawal from, reduced intimacy, diminished personal relationships from family, friends, peers. And later on, inability to perform competitively. I'm going to start talking about EFT specifically as a tool. Well, why do we bother using painkiller or rat poison or vitamins? Well, with a painkiller, we can release unpleasant feelings faster. And then with EFT, unlike with aspirin, they come back less often. The part of what gets tapped out, I don't have a lot of time to talk about brain function again, but there's an issue that nerves that fire together wire together, that if there's an emotional habit, it's almost like a nerve cable gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And part of what EFT does is make the unpleasant generation feelings cables thinner and thinner and thinner, and the positive generation cables thicker and thicker and thicker. So it actually rewires your brain. There's been functional MRIs done while people tap, and have proven this over and over again. It's astounding. You take vitamins to maximize your health. And again, with EFT, people often talk about brushing your teeth. You wouldn't go for weeks without brushing your teeth. That would be kind of gross. But we're very happy to go for weeks without contemplating what we're doing with our feelings. But it builds up. It's the same, because those unpleasant nerve fibers are getting thicker and thicker and thicker. Ossifying, even. If you teach it to yourself as well, then you and your child have a self-soothing tool that you can use together. Leaving distress in the system of you, leaving those cables like they are, often leads to unhelpful extreme beliefs like, I have a few examples here. My parents don't care about me. I need to get a good grades or my life is over. I need to get that good job or my life is over. I need to keep that job or my life is over. I need to keep my marriage or my life is over. I'm no good. I'm no good, I know it because I didn't get that grade, I didn't keep the marriage together, I lost the job. I'm no good. You can tap that all out. It's not who you are, it's a lie. And the cool thing as well is that EFT is fairly simple to learn, as opposed to neuro-linguistic programming, which takes about a year to learn really competently. Why would you not bother? There are loads of reasons, all down to fear. Being afraid that it wouldn't help, being afraid of looking silly, being afraid of getting it wrong. Oh no. Afraid it would uncover deeper stuff that you're even more afraid of, the proverbial can of worms, an emotional can of worms. That comes up a lot, especially when people talk about getting congruent with their partners on what's happening with their children. But I don't want to really stress the marriage, and therefore I better leave this kid stuff where it is. Afraid you'd get laughed at, disrespected, and it would diminish your relationship. Wary of using something seemingly woo-woo and turning into like a New Age junkie and talking about crystals and aliens all the time. Which is okay, if that's who you want to be. But you may not want to be that, and that's okay too. When I first came to EFT, I was extraordinarily skeptical. I learned it from this guy, Dr. Phil Mullen, who is one of the avatars of these energy-based methods. And he said I was the most skeptical person he's ever talked to about it, ever, in all his years of doing this work. And I came to it when I was doing my PhD, and what I did I was, okay, I'm super skeptical, but I will give it a chance. And I think that might be the next slide. Yes, it is evidence-based because I researched it intensely before I do a single tap. What I have prepared for you is, I couldn't fit it all on the screen, but I tried very hard. I know it's an atrocious font. There are 22, yes, I don't expect you to read it. 22 in the past 18 months, there are more, but they wouldn't fit on the page, from energypsych.org, and again, you can have these slides, and it's all on their website, of peer review research. Doesn't include books, doesn't include presentations. There is support for this that is actually stands up to rigorous scientific scrutiny, and it stood up to mine. And I'm a hard sell. Well, okay, if it's so good, why isn't everyone doing it? Especially those psychiatrists dishing out all that Ritalin. Who said it was about efficaciousness or being right? Because we're dealing with human psychology. And human psychology is a bit tricky. We know that from our children and selling them ideas. I won't go through all of these. The thing is that even something like heliocentrism, that we actually circulate around the sun, we have an orbit as opposed to the sun circling around us despite the physical senses, took over 2,000 years to be accepted. That's a really long time for a good idea to come around. And the problem isn't how to innovate, it's how to get society to adopt the good ideas that are already there. AFT is one of those good ideas. Don't take my word for it, go look up the 22. What is it already? Okay. A process that allows you to release emotional blocks, handle unpleasant emotions, sometimes even release physical pain if there's an emotional component to it, and increase your capacity to generate positive emotion by talking through an experience while simultaneously tapping on endpoints of acupuncture meridians, and I'm going to talk you through that. We're going to go back to issues of resilience specifically. Some of the things that EFT can be used for, these are just a few. Tantrums, aversions and phobias, calming down from being anxious or angry, anxiety, handling distress over being bullied specifically. And I want to say here, handling being bullied is a structural issue. It's not up to your kid to be okay with being bullied. It's up to the system of support to come together and fix it. Yeah? In the meantime, yes, the child can be more with what's happening whilst it's getting fixed. By the way, if someone doesn't believe even something as physical as dyslexia can be helped, Google EFT and dyslexia like I did. EFT recipe steps. No, yes?
On the slide before you had about a child that's shut down.
Yes.
The voice used to make conscious choice not to care, not to be bothered about anything. Seemingly on the outside, a very conscious choice, not to put any effort into anything, literally. And it's very, very frustrating apparently at the moment. He's come out of the session this morning, beeping off the walls about how excited he is.
No.
So is that really something that can help get him to enjoy, he doesn't enjoy life, you know?
What shutting down is about is overwhelm and pain. And I'll be talking in another one of my workshops about attachment patterns and how shutting down can be an actual pattern that one unconsciously or even consciously chooses to use to step back from the world. Not to step back from the pain, but to get away from the world that's hurting so very much. And because there's that underground pain that's driving these choices, of course it's amenable to tapping, because it's an emotion and EFT handles emotions.
And will that help him also tell me what that pain is stemming from? Because we don't get it.
It's not a simple yes. It's how it's used, it's when it's used, it's how it's introduced. It could, though. It very much could. I have an example actually from my clinic. I had someone who he wasn't wheeled in, he was led in and sat down, and he was practically drooling from being catatonic from trauma. He was a war veteran. And all I did was I sat on the floor and I tapped the side of his hand and just talk to him about resilience issues. And that's all we did for the first session. That's all we did. The next section he was brought back, he was different, but most of the time I was on the floor tapping. At the end of 3 months, he was able to resolve his legal issues with the Army and go get training and be in the world again. Yes, EFT can help with being shut down. Of course it can. But it needs a lot of detective work and compassion and acceptance. What I'd like to invite you to do is determine something that you want to work on. What I'd like to do is ask you to choose an event that made you upset on a scale of 0 to 10, at about a 7 or an 8. Not massively a 10. Or if you want, go for the 10. Can handle whatever comes up, I promise. And think of a code name for it, and write down your own code name, because you want to keep it private. That's the other really cool thing about this, is it can be content-free. Your kid doesn't need to know, or if they do know, to tell you what's bothering them. They don't need to know. You can still use it. Isn't that awesome? I love this stuff. So think of...
They can learn to do it themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it takes a long time, because again, procedural memory takes a long time, like riding a bike. So you do it with them over and over and over again. What I have done for Alia is I've given her a tappy bear. Well, for her it's a cat. And I've sewn buttons onto the points, so she'll tap on the bear, which does the cat, which does the same thing as tapping on one's own body. Inexplicably, I should say. So yes, they can learn to do it on their own in this way. If they have like a tappy bear, they don't need to know the points because it's all laid out for them. Because obviously we're not going to tattoo our children and then have them look in the mirror and do it. But they have it right there on the stuffed animal for themselves. Or it could be, or if they're like kind of too grown up for a stuffed animal, then you could do a picture and they could tap on the picture. I've seen that done as well. So please take a minute to think of an event for you that was discrete, so not something ongoing, but it may be in an ongoing situation, like maybe trouble at work, but like one event, one challenge that you had. So obviously this is analogous, for instance, to like if your child were to do bullying for themselves. Yeah. So an incident. And out of that incident, pick out about 5 minutes worth, something half an hour or less, and give that a code name and a rating. So if you can all please do that now. Anyone need more time? Okay. We're going to be, I wouldn't do general disorganization with children, but I'll lead you through it just to give you a taste of it. Tap through the sequence and get the SUDS rating again and see how you're doing. So I'll lead you through general disorganization, which is a way of correcting the energy system. It's a bit like, you know, a bird can't fly if all its feathers are going in different directions. So it's a kind of way of preening your energy, of kind of making it all flow in one direction. So it's very, very simple, and it's also very relaxing. Even if you don't use EFT ever again in your life, which I certainly hope you do use it again, this is a really nice relaxation technique. So if you put your hands into loose fists, doesn't matter which way over you cross, it doesn't matter at all. Rest your knuckles on your collarbone. And then I'm going to talk through it really fast, and then we're going to do it. It's going to exhale all the way, inhale halfway, hold, inhale all the way, hold, exhale halfway, hold, and then have a breath. Okay? So exhale all the way, inhale halfway, hold, inhale all the way, hold, exhale halfway, hold, and then have a breath. And then fingertips on your collarbone. And then exhale all the way. Inhale halfway, hold. Inhale all the way, hold. Exhale halfway, hold. Exhale, and have a breath. Anyone notice any difference? Just from doing that as a Big yes in the corner. Anyone else as well? Or do you want to speak about that? No?
Well, I've practiced Qigong and Sabu's lining up your chakra points and meridian points and this, so it's
Yes, there's more science in there than we're talking about, yes. So there are some people that had no difference and some people that did have some. I'm going to show you the points now. Just letting yourself put your code word to the back of your mind while we go over the points. First one's the top of the head, which is, if it doesn't, nobody's wearing a ponytail, just kind of where the head begins to slope back. That's the point of thousands crossings in acupuncture. And just kind of tap, preferably with your fingertips, so that you see people do it in different styles. Again, there's science behind it, but I'm not going to go into it here. The next is the eyebrow, which is the beginning bit of your eyebrow, or above the corner of your eyes if somebody has a monobrow. Then you tap there. And then if you slide your index, your 2 fingers, to the corner of your eye, around, because you can feel that eye socket. Just on the corner there, very gently, tap there. That's your side of eye point. A little bit lower. Yeah. A little bit lower again. Yeah. Okay. And then under your eye, again, slide under that orbit, looking straight ahead right under your pupils. Right where your cheek skin transitions to under eye skin. It's brilliant. Yes, you can use 1 finger or 2 fingers or 4 fingers or either side, it doesn't matter. Okay. Next, the easiest one to find is the under nose point. Guess where that is? This is a governing vessel. This is bladder, gallbladder, stomach, governing vessel. And then it's called chin point or under lip point. It's in that cleft. It's much easier to find when you don't have a beard. None of us have here. It's that indent right there. That's the under lip or chin point. The next is the collarbone point, which I can teach you how to find, but I can't tell you where it is because it's different on everybody. And you put your hand in the notch, the suprasternal notch in the base of your neck there, and slide either to the left or the right until you feel the knobbly bit of the end of your collarbone. And then up your collarbone, follow your collarbone up about 1.5 inches. It's technically kind of up under there, but never mind. Just kind of tap around that area, about 1.5 inches up for from your collarbone, but not on the bone because that can get painful. I taught this one person who was so diligent about this, he actually bruised himself when he first started EFT. The next is the underarm point. That's the kidney meridian, by the way. The next is the underarm point, which is the spleen meridian, which is not in the armpit, but down from the armpit, about where a bra would be if you were wearing one. It's kind of on line with a word that we're not supposed to use very often, nipple, that we use a lot when breastfeeding. The next is the liver point, and it's down from the nipple, under that imaginary or actual bra, and off laterally to the side a little bit. It's a little bit higher. You have a very low bra. A little bit higher.
not my answer though. You double A, don't you?
With children, the underarm point could be the monkey point. That's a really great way of introducing it, which you'll see in the video with Alia. Next, there are hand points. And they're all in the same spot, kind of analogously on each of the fingers. So you get the top of your thumb, the side of the finger, just on the base of the fingernail. That's where it is. Perfect. Other side. Yeah. Yeah. Other side. Yes. Other side. So if you turn with your palm facing you, that bit. Yes. And then the same, the top, what looks like the top. Then when you get used to it, you can like do all kind of fancy things with your hand. So that's the index finger. The thumb is the lung meridian. This is the large intestine meridian. Next is the middle finger, which is the heart meridian. Next, ring finger, triple heater, to do with survival issues. This will be very important for anyone feeling shut down. Baby finger, heart protector meridian. Also for survival shutdown stuff, you can stimulate this ring finger on the back of the hand between the 4th and 5th. I always get confused in metacarpals or carpals. Anyway, back of your hand between the 4th and 5th bit. You tap there, and do about 50 taps. You don't have to count, you just get used to the timing after a while. You can hear happiness sensor. And have a pause and a breath. Those are the points. Now, if you think about your code word now and the SUDS rating you have, who here had SUD ratings come down? What? No, one person did. 2 people. A few more did. Shyly putting your hands up. But this wasn't even focusing on it. That was putting it to the side. We weren't even working on your stuff yet. Now, I did give a very tricky instruction to your subconscious mind to put your code word to the back of your mind while we do this. So that was very deliberate on my part to encourage something like this to happen. The thing is, if it's going to begin to work for some of you, even accidentally, think of what it can do when you do it on purpose with skill. There are a lot of reasons why someone's SUDS won't come down, and this method is much more complex than it looks, but the actual teaching of it only takes minutes. There's a 9-gamut process as well. It is really silly looking, but there's another thing called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing by Dr. Francine Shapiro. It's actually, EMDR is NICE approved, NHS okayed. And so it's about cross-brain communication. So I'm going to give you a little taste of EMDR embedded with EFT. Tapping on the back of your hand. I know it's really dumb, but it's not dumb. Okay. So open eyes, open eyes, look down one way, look down the other, twirl your eyes in a circle the other way, and then hum like, and then count to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hum again, and that's it. For people who have birthday issues, you can do Row Row Your Boat, or Shine, or Mary Had a Little Lamb, doesn't matter. And that's it. That's the whole process. With that, how many people's SUDS came down? Yeah, that little trick can be pivotal.
What's actually going on?
It's the corpus callosum. There's whilst this meridian, as I've said, is involved in survival issues. And what happens with most people is that any distress comes from a perception of being harmed. Harm links up to survival. So this meridian is going to be involved in just about any distress. So whilst this is being stimulated, there's the cross-brain communication going on, and in acupuncture terms, it brings the meridian to balance. What's overstimulated comes down, what's understimulated comes up. We don't know exactly how it works, but that seems to be what's happening.
With the eye movements, are you distracting your brain?
No. Because this question comes up a lot, because then I could say, oh gosh, you were raped, I'm so sorry. Look, there's a tiger! Oh, I'm fine now, thanks doc, and off you go. Distraction doesn't work. It might work for a moment, and of course as parents, we know that action distraction has been really critical, for the very young years as well, but that's a separate sort of thing. For distress is kind of floating on the top of the mind, a bit of distraction will make it go away. But for more embedded stress, for more embedded distress, a momentary distraction isn't going to do a thing in the long term. It's working with the body, because it's encoded in the body.
Is there any?
You first, and then...
If you wanted to work on an issue, so how do you do that? Do you use the same technique to kind of have repeated sessions, or just doing the same thing? Is that what you
Yeah, like for my clients, because our distress can be so massive. I mean, for all of us, if we were to have to find every event and then tap that through, we'd have to live another 1,000 years just to get through the first, 15. So there are ways of generalizing and going for like a root issue. It's a bit like when you have a structure like Jenga. If you pull out something rather critical, the whole thing will come down. So it's learning how to do the detective work and finding the right bit to kind of pull out. But if you're not sure about how to do that, then just start tapping. And there's this thing called the generalization effect that you'll see a lot about on the net. And it's like magic. You'll be in this forest of events, of horrible things. And you just keep on tapping one at a time. And then you suddenly look up and you're in a bit of a meadow. It's really quite astonishing. I can tell you from my personal experience and from countless clients' experiences as well. It does happen. The best way to start is by just doing experiences, or what's in your handout is the physical pain technique. Because let's say if, you might not even remember what happened. Like, something happened before I was 10, I don't know, but what's going on in my body? Oh, I feel some tension here. What color is it? I feel it's a bit brown and it's a bit sludgy. Okay, so you write down sludgy brown feeling, and then you tap on the sludgy brown feeling. So you don't even have to know what the event was. You don't even have to know what the feeling is. You don't have to have the emotional intelligence to name a feeling, which again is very applicable to children. And also children love doing things like, imagining stuff. Oh, the sludge in my stomach. And you can laugh about it as well. Would here be a good space to, I think we're just going to play Ali's video. I know you played it before. Oh. Sasha, would you mind coming up and doing it? Ah, stop clicking. Oh, that's simple. Thank you. It needs no introduction because I've already recorded an introduction on it.
This awesome video that you're about to watch is completely 100% genuine. Just a few minutes ago, while we were tidying up the kitchen, we came across an issue that needed tapping with my daughter, my young daughter, and we came upstairs and did this with you. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know exactly how we were going to do it. It's 100% genuine, and with a really amazing, successful results that you can really see for yourself because we tested it. So enjoy the video. Hope you learn lots. So hello, I'm Dr. Shoshana Garfield, and this is my daughter, Aliyah, that's right. Aliyah's 6. And we're here today to share something really fun with you. Aliyah has some icky feelings about touching icky stuff. So, which prevents her from fully participating in putting dirty dishes in the dishwasher. So we're here to help with that. And want to share the process with you. Now, every child is different, and we do EFT differently with every child where they are. So sometimes, Aliyah is very familiar with EFT because we've done a lot of tapping together and seeing it. Sometimes when I'm upset, Aliyah will just start tapping on me in different places because she's still learning the points. It's very well intentioned. Thank you very much. Thank you, buddy. And so yesterday, for instance, we did tapping on Aliyah's feet. And even though there are no points on Aliyah's beautiful feet to tap for, I had the intention, can you see it? Lift it up higher. I had the intention of, this is the side of hand, and this would be the thumb point, and etc. So we just kind of worked it individually and made it work. So today, we're going to tap on getting you how to have fun with the yucky stuff. Okay, so how yucky do you feel? As yucky as you can feel with that is like this I'm a great kid. Even though the thought, oh, and we'll get to your head point in a minute. Even though, okay, so pause and relax, wonderful child. Even though that mess on the plate and the mess on the fork, the thought of it touching my fingers or touching it with my fingers is really yucky. I'm a great kid. And why are you a great kid?
Just because I'm
That's right, just because you are, that's right. Even though it's really yucky, the thought of touching all that, I'm still a great kid. Even though it's really yucky to think of touching that stuff, ew! I'm a great kid. Okay, so top of the head point. Do you want to top the top of my hair? Will I top the top of yours? Yuck! Mess on my fingers! Okay, next eyebrow. Oh, yucky fork, yucky plate. Side of eye. Oh, the thought of that on my fingers is so yucky. Blech. Yeah, like that. Okay, now under eye. Ew, mess on the fork, mess on the plate, mess on my fingers. Ew, ick on my hands. I don't like the feeling on my hands. Ew. Ew, 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 I don't like the feeling. Okay, now we just have to be careful of the mic. Just tap on this side over here. Ew, ew, ick, ick, ick. Okay. Underarm. Yeah, you can laugh when you think of the icky stuff now, can't you? Inside of your wrist? It does tickle. Ew, icky. Wrist point. Oh, icky. Stuff on my fingers. What? Let's just have a pause now. No. You stay up there. Yeah, look at that. Let me get it then. Okay, what's it like now? How about all 4 or 5 fingers in there? There you have it, folks. Successful tapping in 1 round. Okay, so first we had a very obvious aversion reaction to the mess. And we did 1 round of tapping in ways that were appropriate for Leah. She wanted to tap on me when I was tapping with her for more interaction. Some kids wanted different ways, but we accommodated to Leah. And at the end, we have an obvious, complete release from the aversion and fun with muck. So thank you very much. Bye for now.
Any questions on this?
Did it last?
Yeah. To this day, she prefers loading the dishwasher to unloading it.
She had that for a long time.
Well, we tend to be like really proactive, so we don't let things hang around for a long time. As soon as we see it, we're like, right, let's do something about that. Or, well, that's just, not going to help you, so we're not helping you if we let you do that, so it's not going to happen. And get her on board. Mm-hmm.
So if you had things that you assume came from some aspects that are sort of ingrained, I mean, can you really stop that? Say like heightened sensitivities to noise or can it really help?
There were long-term issues. I talked about my daughter having those 3 body blows of divorce, a death, and a move. And, so some things go much more slowly. For that, we did more surrogate tapping. And that surrogate tapping might be more appropriate for some more long-term stuff. But also introducing it to them as well, to do both together. Again, if you Google surrogate tapping, we don't have the time to go into it here. But yes, and also like with resiliency, we talked about leveraging off maximally what your child has. The thing is that we don't know the limits of these methods. As far as I know, it won't grow back an amputated arm, but I do know that it has made pain go away where the pain should still be there. Really, there's no medical reason for the person to get better, but they do. I have an example of someone, I have his permission to talk about it, he's so excited about it. Since he was 14, he was in his bed for 3 or 4 days every 6 to 8 weeks. And I called him at home not knowing, I just thought he was working from home that day when we were in the same office. And he told me he was just in too much agony to talk. So I was like, you know what, I don't know if it's gonna work, let's just try it. Are you up for it? He's like, well, as long as I can just hold and breathe, because the tapping would hurt too much, because his back pain was so agonizing, even a tap would kind of send reverberations. In 10 minutes, I had to treat him for shock, because he was out of bed and touching his toes. We let it sit and had a session with him that evening, which we recorded. We got to the root issue of the belief system that was generating this, and he checked in with me 2 years later after we both moved on, and it had never come back. The things that EFT can do are just practically biblical in proportions. So I don't know how much it can help, but it's almost certain that with the right and expert application of it, that it can.
So can I just ask, I've got a problem with my child is that if she makes a mistake about something, like she did this at school last week, she made a mistake on a final question out of so many, and in her favourite subject, which is maths, and she basically, when she found out she made a mistake, ripped the page up, put it in the bin, and then refused to do anything else for the rest of the lesson. Now, like, it's not the first time she does that at home. She does like 20 sums, and finds out two of them are wrong, or one of them is wrong, sorry. She totally focuses on that one thing that's wrong, and she does almost that shutdown thing. You know, if you then ask her about it, it's like, that's it, I'm not talking about it.
It's too
She's
painful.
like that with the teachers as well. So how to tackle that from you know, if you start to teach her this tapping method, do you do it like that and say, right, so when you tore up your bits of paper, how bad was that?
Yeah, this is a good visual scale. Maybe for your child, maybe she'll do 6.2, you know, for her suds, you know, so kids are different. I do know people that do, someone did it to 2 digits actually, past the decimal point once. And so using it in a way that works with your child, but also introducing it again always beforehand. And then also, sometimes children don't know cognitively what's going on for them. It wasn't the answer that was wrong that set her off. It was the meaning she was making of that wrong answer.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what we do with Alia is say, well, I wonder if what you were thinking was this, or this, or this, or this, or this. And then usually we'll put in something really silly as well, just to kind of give it a bit of levity. And then she'll say, oh yeah, the second one, or the first thing. She can't even repeat the words, she's so distressed. And so we'll talk it through, or we'll tap or something. We do much less tapping now, but that's because we've done so much tapping before. We've done a lot of the tapping out. But yes.
So in the end, when she gets that feeling, when she's about to do that again, she should tap. Is that right?
I don't like using the word should. I think.
Oh, right. Well, she might.
Well, she might want to if she's convinced that it will be useful. So you have to give her a win somewhere else. And that's really important. Make sure they get a win somewhere else before using on the big thing. We recently used it for Alia on an issue that had been ongoing. And we actually used a couple of advanced techniques, but it did stop it entirely. We spent about an hour and a half when we were on holiday working on that. So sometimes the sessions can go quite long, but you know, the child has to build tolerance for that as well. And we took breaks and we came back and we did different things and joked around and then circled back to it. So overall it was an hour and a half, but we didn't tap for an hour and a half. But it's also about saying beforehand as well, but that's not an acceptable thing to do. And it's a difference between your feelings are acceptable and your strategies of what you do with your feelings are a separate matter. It's really important to separate them out, because with a lot of people, not only do the strategies and the feelings get enmeshed, but it gets enmeshed with the identity as well, which is part of what's going on for your girl. I'm good at maths, therefore the wrong answer is challenging my identity. It's tearing apart the foundations of who I am. And I'm not saying that lightly, even though we can see that that's not true. It's what's going on for her. That's real. That's hard.
I think sometimes there's a challenge to actually being able to work that out, because as children they can't, you know, they haven't got the skill or the experience to be able to sometimes even identify what they're feeling.
Exactly.
And as a parent, you do what you think and quite often relate it to maybe your own experiences, but it's not.
It's
what the
not
child's
necessarily
feeling.
relevant, yeah.
So that's quite hard, and I think it does get easier as they get older, and they can vocalise what they're feeling a bit more. But even then, it's difficult sometimes to work out where it comes from or the reason behind it.
which is why it's good to, instead of going for cognitive tracking, especially with younger children, or with really flooded children, say, gosh, you're feeling so much right now. Where is this in your body, darling? Say, oh, I'm feeling this awful blackness all in my chest. And it's heavy and it's dense, but you'll talk through those questions. And then you could use the tapping like that. So you don't have to have the cognitive psychoanalytic elements, which can obviously be quite complex for a person who doesn't have their prefrontal cortex fully online yet.
Because as a perfectionist myself, there's nothing wrong with being a perfectionist. There's nothing wrong with striving to get all the answers wrong, all the answers right. So what's the end point? Are you
Hang on,
trying to get
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Did you all hear that that confuddlement, as it were, of identity and strategy? I'm a perfectionist. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get things right. They're separate things. You don't have to label yourself as something.
The end point is not saying it's fine if I get things wrong.
That looks like anathema.
It's not.
Yes, that is like poison. Mm.
Yeah.
And so that's what you tap on, and then see where it takes you.
So what am I trying to tell my brain? That it's fine if I've got 3 questions wrong.
Why is it not fine?
Because from a perfectionist point of view, you want to get them right.
So one of the questions you can ask, and I use this a lot in my sessions, is what's the worst thing about that? And then from that answer, what's the worst thing about that? And then what's the worst thing about that? And what's the worst thing about that? And you can go to some very strange places just by asking that one question over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with getting everything right. Absolutely nothing. It's lovely. The difficulty is thinking that you should all the time because it's not attainable.
No, I mean, I work it through and say, well, worst things happen at sea.
Yeah.
I've got to a point where well, it actually doesn't matter. It's fine. I can live with 18 and 20.
I have to say, I'm totally the same, which is probably why she's like
Yeah, and I have a perfectionist.
Well, I've got to a point where I actually see it sometimes as being a disadvantage to me to be like that, because it sometimes stops me getting something done.
Absolutely.
Because I'm trying to do it to perfection, when actually I can afford to spend less time on it. We're not having it perfect. I'll be able to do some of the other things that are on my
But
list.
my
This is
being a perfectionist helps the job that I do.
It helps in a lot of jobs. People like air traffic controllers and surgeons. Yeah, project managers, all sorts of jobs. It's really great to have that trait of really caring about every last minute detail. Of course, yeah?
It's about managing it so it has a positive impact on you and everyone else, not a negative impact.
Yes.
And when you get 19 out of 20 and get upset about only getting 19 out of 20, that's going to have a negative impact on you.
Yes, and that's about the meaning in stacks. Where I think I've got a slide somewhere about stacks of meanings, where there are these primary filters and then filters that go on top of that, and they can go from either direction. So I've gotten something wrong, and that means that I didn't do something I was supposed to do, or I've challenged my identity. You can go into different sorts of issues, and you just kind of keep on drilling down. What often drills down with perfectionism, you find a few strands that are very common with perfectionism. One is a fear of mediocrity. So again, it comes to fear, and when that fear is let go of, it's not so much that here's another thing as well. There's a fear that if I let go of caring about it to this degree, then I'll be okay with getting things wrong all the time. And it's not true. If you think of it like an aversion, like a phobia, when you use EFT for phobias and aversion, you can think of it like a phobia of wrongness, of getting things wrong, an aversion in that way. So there is a famous case, you'll see in a lot of literature if you look into this, a case of a woman called Mary, who was so afraid of water that she could barely tolerate washing her hands. And she was working for years with this guy, Dr. Roger Callahan, and he worked at home, very wealthy psychiatrist, psychologist, clinical psychologist. And he had a swimming pool, as one does. And he did some tapping with her for anxiety, stomach meridian, one of those 1-minute wonders that happens once in a while. She ran over to the swimming pool and Roger was like, "But Mary, you can't swim." And she was like, "I know. What do you think, I'm stupid?" And she went and she was like just splashing around in the water. But like just with her hands and her feet, not going in because she knew she couldn't swim. It just takes away the excess. Just the excessive bit. Not the good stuff. And that's the cool thing about EFT as well. The cool bits about really caring about getting things right stay in place. And you get to keep the goodies. You just let go of the excess. So there's absolutely no risk involved whatsoever. But there can be a fear of there being a risk, so you tap on that first.
Can I just go back to children? So if your child is anxious about trying new things, my son does get anxious, and he will verbalize it as well. He will say, "What if I get it wrong? What if what if the teacher asks me a question, I don't know the answer?" So how would you work on that? So give a name to each individual event and just talk about that. Because
Well,
I
you
don't
could-
know if I can get rid of, because it's part of his personality.
No, it's not.
Mm.
It just seems like it is because it's so persistent.
I mean, it would be great if you just got rid of that trait entirely.
We all have the capacity for anxiety. The capacity for anxiety is not going to disappear from us. Yeah, we're human. But what it can do is not be so predominant in us that it looks like it's part of who we are. In terms of strategy, I would do things like role-playing. It's okay, so what if that does happen? What's going on in your body now? You've imagined you've gotten something wrong, now what? And really go there with them, with your breath, with your voice. Go there with them, do the tone, act with them, do it, and then tap it through. And you may have to do this for several things at once. But it's really being persistent. So I see two questions, one and then another. Yes?
It's quite a bit different. My eldest child has developed a thing against his brother. And we talk about it, he's very variable. And says, "Do you think I pay more attention to him or his dad does?" He says, "No, it's just, he's annoying." And he's an 8-year-old, his brother, so he's not a little child. And he's not, he's just beyond, there's no really reason for it. And it's really, really aggressive, verbal, yet to put him down continuously all the time. It's quite difficult because his brother is also a gifted child, so he's very intelligent. And except for keeping them apart, basically. I cannot manage how to actually deal with it.
Reminds me of a quote from Phyllis Dillon who says, "When I had my first child, I was a mother. When I had my second, I became a referee." Families happen in systems. We can look at a child as having a problem, but it's not the child that's having the problem. It's the child expressing a problem for the system. It's a really critical difference. Yeah? So both of you have spoken about noticing your children have difficulty with perfection and misuse, and then said, "Yep, me too." Yeah? It's a system involved here. Yeah? And so the whole system needs to change. It's not like, "You, kid, you change and make everything better." It doesn't work like that. Yeah? It's not like, "You, son, be nicer to your brother," and then everything's gonna, yeah? It's a systems issue. And although tapping can help in some of it, a lot more reflection needs to happen on what's going on in the family. I get my mothering MOT'd once a year. I go to someone who watches us all interact and talks to Alia separately. And then we get our report on the things that we need to, think about shifting. Yeah, it's a system issue. And that is that's sibling rivalry stuff. Some of it is individual and temperamental. And Raising Resilient Children talks about different temperaments in children. And also there's a specialist book with the same name written for children on the spectrum and who are Asperger's and that sort of thing. So there are issues of an individual, but there are also issues of the system, and they all need to be taken into account to fix a problem. There's like that. There is no like, "Well, you just do this one thing, there you go, I've written on this tiny piece of paper, you do that and it's gone." It's not going to happen that way. There are no quick fixes.
So, is EFT a combination of tapping and the words that you say in Welsh tapping? So, you've taught us the tapping bit. The words that we say, surely that's way more complex.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So especially when you're talking about the physical pain technique. So if you're thinking, okay, Can I use one of you guys prone to perfectionism to do a little bit of a demo? Yeah, I was about to say.
I'm in a unique.
You want to come up and do something?
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like to, how about, did you have something specific in mind, or are you also a perfectionist?
Yeah, but I sort of had to let go during the years after I had my child. You know, I thought it was a waste of time, really.
Okay.
Yeah, it was too. I don't have time to be perfectionist.
I used to iron my daughter's onesies. I didn't do that for the second. Okay, so if to do a quick demo, how about the distress you feel when one of your sons is going into the other?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so think of the last time that happened. The last, the first, the worst, the last, usually, the one of those three. First, worst, or last?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I could see the tension going across here. Yeah, okay. Okay, if you give this a code name.
Okay. Sandwich.
Pardon?
Sandwich.
Sandwich?
Yeah.
Sandwich, okay. What I do is I write down the answers because I'm not going to rely on my memory. Okay, so the code word sandwich. And I know you're already there, but for this sandwich feeling that's bringing tears to your eyes, where is it in your body?
Mainly in this area. Sort of a little bit in the tongue as well. But sort of, it's so strong here that makes me move this way.
And this tension in your chest that's making you go like this.
Yeah.
If this had a color, what color would it have?
White. I would say the silvery.
And if this white silvery feeling in your chest making you go like this had a density, what density would it have?
Like metal.
And this kind of metally sort of density texture, is that light or heavy? Because some, like aluminum foil can be light,
it's
lead can be
nice.
heavy. It's very heavy. Okay. So, if this white, silvery, heavy metal in your chest had a shape, if any, what shape might that be?
And it's really smooth, it's like a plank.
Okay. So we're going to tap. Use words. Okay. So it's going to, yeah, this will be okay. I won't big enough. Okay. So just tapping the side of your hand. Yeah. I've got this sandwich feeling and it's awful. And I'm a good person. I've got this sandwich feeling.
I have this sandwich feeling.
And I can't make my boys stop arguing.
I can make them stop arguing.
And I'm still a good mom.
I'm still a good mom.
Even though part of me doesn't believe it.
Even if a part of me doesn't believe it.
I've got this sandwich feeling.
I got this sandwich feeling.
It's in my stomach.
It's in my stomach.
It's in my chest.
It's in my chest.
White and silvery.
White and silvery.
Smooth plank.
Smooth plank.
And I am good.
I'm good.
Okay, so we're just going to use some of the words you came up with. Top of head, smooth plank.
Smooth plank.
Eyebrow, making my chest go like this.
Making my chest go like this.
Side of eye, white and silvery.
White and silvery.
Under eye, it's heavy metal.
Heavy metal.
Under nose, it's making my chest go like this.
It's making my chest go like that.
Chin point, sandwich feeling.
Sandwich feeling.
Collarbone. I wonder who's the filling of the sandwich.
Who's the filling of the sandwich?
Underarm. Heavy white silvery metal.
Heavy white silvery metal.
Liver point, smooth plank.
Smooth plank.
And then wrist. I let it go.
Let it go.
Okay. Just have another breath and a pause. Okay? Yeah, shake it off, shake it off.
Yeah. You need to, yeah.
So, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to think about that one sandwich event again. We didn't get a SUDS rating, but it was pretty intense. What is it now?
It's a lot less, yeah. I can sort of feel from the side rather than being in it. So I'm an outsider now.
And
I feel more relaxed.
what's your name, by the way?
Andrea,
Andrea.
sorry.
So what Andrea literally physically demonstrated, we were talking about resilience, being able to step back. The feeling, I was guessing that it was being stuck in the middle and being consumed. There was a consuming aspect of it. So there's this distance from it, of being able to step back now. One round of tapping. One round. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Andrea. What is always the case is if something's upsetting you about your kid, you tap on it for you first. Always, without exception. Even if you know that kid's got to fix that thing. My daughter used to wet her pants. I hope she doesn't watch this when she's older and knows it's embarrassing. Of course she's got to stop doing that by the time, I don't know, she's 16 or something, to have a normal life. She's got to stop doing it. So what did I do? I tapped on my needing her to stop doing it. That was first. Because unless I got rid of that need for her to stop doing that, then I'd be coming at her with shoulds and my tension and anxiety. And how in the world is that going to help her? So what we talk about a system. The first one in the system that needs to change is you. It makes making sense. You are really nodding there. Yeah. Any questions on that? Even if it's tapping on my child's not resilient and it's really getting under my skin. I'm not resilient about my child not being resilient. Okay, we got a couple of questions here first and then in the back.
How does the tapping fit in with the breathing technique?
Sequentially. So for the collarbone breathing stuff, it could fit in a couple of different ways. Tech support, please. So as the tech support, thank you very much, is going on, what you do is you name your thing, you get your SUDS before or after, you can do the breathing technique, and then you might get your SUDS if you didn't do it before, and then do the tapping sequence. You could just do the breathing technique without any tapping. Some people found a little bit of relaxation with that just as it was. You don't always need it, but for me, I'm very sensitive to it. It's quite nice. And then that book, Conscious Breathing, by Gay Hendricks, has a lot of breathing techniques in there. For one client I had with OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, and a phobia of work, which wasn't very helpful. He had a PhD as well, bless him. He's given me permission to talk about this. And a successful resolution. He now has a family, a new job, a new career. It's lovely. He's got a really good life. And I just heard from 2 days ago, I got a picture of his kid. And he was talking about how relaxed he is with his baby, which is lovely. The thing that worked for him was getting down on the floor with his knees up, and putting his hands on his belly and doing rising, falling breathing, just paying attention to breathing from the belly. Because one of the things we learn in NLP is that, and you can stand up and do this now, your feeling state follows your physiology. Could you all stand up, please? I'll use a Yiddish word with you, schlump. Everybody schlump. Really get those shoulders down and compress the torso here. Now think a happy thought. I don't know, but it's not working for me. So stand up, put your shoulders back. Now think of something a bit more cheerful. Yeah, it's much easier, isn't it? Yeah. So have a seat. Anxious breathing always involves upper chest breathing. So if you get yourself, when you're feeling anxious or your child's feeling anxious, start breathing from the belly, your feeling will change. though it helps. It doesn't get to underlying psychoanalytical issues, of course, but it can help in the moment. So you're looking for a multi-modality strategy, because what you're wanting to do is to change a situation in whatever millimeter steps or meter steps or mile steps that's going to be possible. Any questions? Oh, it's back up again. In terms of the leading, I cannot emphasize this enough, that you really need to go there first. Current slide. Are there any questions on that? That is much easier said than done, by the way. That is actually that's like getting slapped in the face with a glove. This one is. Oh my word. We've done time. Okay, what we wound up doing was talking about more the examples, which is really what you had wanted. We didn't talk as much about the resiliency, the meaning of it, and the philosophies undergirding it. But I can tell you this. I'm speaking to you as someone who has had a childhood with abuse off the scale, as you know, with a child that is dead and a wonderful child alive. Like most of us, I have not been immune to what we would consider tragedy. And I am fine. None of those things that were so painful have hurt me. And none of the things that are painful to you are hurting you either. The circumstance doesn't matter. That sounds like an appalling claim to make. But it is the very heart of resiliency. And it doesn't matter. My dead child, I kid you not, is the same as that girl's wrong question. There is no difference in them. And I am not diminishing the death of my son. I am recognizing with humble profundity that we create our experiences, all of them, with the way we think about it. The structure of distress is the same no matter what the content, no matter what it's directed at. Yeah, I can point a camera wherever I point it, it's still a camera. Distress is thinking. No matter where I'm pointing it, it's still the thinking about it. A lack of resilience is about thinking that says, I'm wrong if this happens, I'm harmed if this happens, something is less, something important is diminished when this happens. That is the fundamental chipping away at the groundworks of resiliency. And having that fundamental okayness underneath, whatever happens, I'm okay. If we don't go on holiday together after planning it for 2 years, we hadn't gone on holiday together in 2 years, it's okay, we're okay. It wasn't detachment from each other or not being a family or relief that I wouldn't be spending a week with my beloved. It was that we're okay. And it changes everything. You have to go there first. You have to know that for yourself. And unless you do, whatever you help your children with is going to be diminished into technique. Whatever you achieve is going to be limited by your own limitations of what's possible for your unconditional goodness and okayness. And I urge you with all of my heart, for the sake of your children, to know your deep okayness for yourself. I can't emphasize that enough. And that's the fundamental message. Are there any last sort of questions or comments? Okay. I humbly ask you to fill in the forms as honestly as possible, because my well-being doesn't depend on getting good feedback. But the quality of these presentations do. So please be very honest in all of your feedback.